Welcome, everybody, to Triple T number 97. And our Triple T host, our usual host, TJ, is on the road traveling. So I will be guest hosting for a little bit. So welcome, everyone. If you would like to reach out to TJ, you can visit his website at theTSWB.com. Oh my God, sorry, TJ, that is off the top of my head. He likes to he likes to help answer people's questions as much as possible. He will clearly tell you that he does not know everything, but he will do his very best to help you in any way that he can. My name is Lenora Edwards, and I am your host for the temporary time being. And we will jump in. Does anybody have anything fun and exciting that they would like to share that happened over the last week since we last saw each other?
I think I'll maybe jump in just a little bit. Sorry, I'm off camera at the moment, but hi, everybody. I know on YouTube you can't see those of us that are off camera. But I will say that I had somebody working with me. This is kind of a Triple T thing. It's not necessarily what we covered last week, but just on having healthy boundaries. And I will say it amazed me. We did an exercise where we kind of went through how have people influenced us in the past, and why did it work? How has it impacted us today? That sort of thing. And it really opened my eyes to see how many people influence us day to day. I mean, I knew some of it, but it was way more than I ever dreamed. And just kind of that reminder, something somebody said, because sometimes if it's just one person, you're like, oh yeah, that person was toxic. It was 20 years ago. I've dismissed myself from it. But even just recognizing, as somebody said, 10,000 people can still all say the same thing and still be wrong. And so, yes, it's important to listen to other people, but it's also important to trust your gut and listen to your gut as well. So that was a very healing experience for me, but also very educational, and I loved it. So
I love that was healing for you and educational. And it's so funny when I first started. So and I say first started, like when I first started having the desire to, hey, who am I? You got a lot of negative thoughts in here, Lenora. Let's clean this up. When I first started that journey, that I was 21, and I had, hi, Fran, welcome. I had no idea what a boundary was to say that I actually had them. And I just kind of thought, yeah, I have boundaries, and my family is super close, and I keep my friends really close, and then everybody else is out there. I did not understand people putting their thoughts on me, people putting their opinions on me. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And then realizing that I can actually stand up for myself and say, that may work for you. Thank you. I appreciate that. That doesn't work for me. And to be able to quite literally stand up and not have a physical response of being nauseous or, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that, and not having that panic go on is a world of a difference. And not thinking, or I would think, what are they going to think of me? I just said that, versus actually thinking, I don't really mind what they think about that. Like, that's okay. That's their opinion. There's our host. And having that ability to put that on them and draw that boundary and then feel okay with it. That was huge. I completely agree with you, Holly, when you say raising your awareness of your own boundaries, it just gets more and more and more. Welcome, TJ, to your Triple T.
Well, love technology, and then there's the rest of the year, but we made it, and we are live from the road in Tucson, Arizona. Thank you so much to Lenora for getting us going on time, because obviously got some challenges. Can you guys hear me okay? I forgot to. Okay. So, how is everybody doing?
We're doing great. We were just talking about boundaries, and Holly was super happy that she had noticed a variety of things over the last couple of days, and just really raising our own awareness that we were talking about how important boundaries are and what they actually look like, and being able to actually stand up for yourself.
Very, very important. And I've got a quick question for you guys.
Yes.
How are boundaries created? What are they made of?
And what are they made of? Texture?
Yes.
That's a good question. I was telling everyone before you had popped on, I thought I knew what a boundary was. As in, yeah, I couldn't even have really explained what a boundary was, but I would have said I had boundaries, and just understanding, being able to stand up for yourself and not cripple or crumble.
I'll jump in too. I think a lot of a boundary is you need to have a clearly communicated rule that's externally measurable. And then you need to have a defined, if you want an effective one, you need to have a defined consequence for breaking that rule. And I mean, there's obviously lots of different ways you could do it, but as long the consequence needs to do one of two things. Either one, it needs to motivate the other person to honor your boundary, or two, it needs to make you not care if they break your boundary because you just follow through with the consequence and you're restored to where you need to be. So that consequence may just be, you know what, I can't talk to you. I can't hang out with you anymore. Or maybe it's I can hang out with you, but it's only going to be in my, low priority time. You are not as high of a priority in my life anymore. Or it might be, like I'm going to cut, if it's a transactional thing, it's, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to call the cops and have you arrested. Hopefully those are the extreme versions. But yeah, you need to, and it's not really fair to them if you follow through on the consequence, but the rule wasn't defined enough for them to understand it. So that's why it's important to make sure that it's very clearly defined and externally measurable so that there's no question when they've crossed it.
I like that one, Holly. That's a good one.
Absolutely. Fully agree.
I was
Where I was
thinking.
going with this, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Where I was going with this is understanding that boundaries are created through our values and criteria. And through a lot of times external programming. And people that have issues with boundaries, if you drill down to values and criteria and external programming and upbringing, a lot of times they may have had boundaries, but when they tried to enforce them, they shut down too hard. Or were told that it was inappropriate, or any of the above. And you look at some people who have very distinct, they have no problems enforcing their boundaries whatsoever. But when you look at how that came about, a lot of times it goes back to childhood. How were they brought up? How did they have to stand up for themselves, or a major life event where they were forced to stand up for themselves in such a dramatic way, and all of a sudden they realized, wow, not for myself. And that gives them that posture. And the cool part about it is it shows that it can be transformed. It can be a learned tool, if you want to say it, a useful, learned function. And oftentimes, especially those that have been in abusive relationships or have gone through mental attacks, things of that nature, mental abuse, forget that it's okay for them to have boundaries and to expect to be treated with respect, and whatever other values and criteria have been taken away from them. Does that make sense?
Very much so. I know for sure growing up, anytime I would stick up for myself, it was who said you could do that? Who gave you the permission to do that? You have no ability to do that. You have no power here. And it was immediately shut down. So anytime I would try to stand up for myself, A, I was shut down. And then B, I didn't know how to. I really couldn't express other than walking away. That's all I had.
And pretty clear now, of course, isn't it?
Huge. Hugely
Yes.
apparent now.
But the cool part is it became a parent and real play on words.
Right.
You became aware of the fact that you have the right to set boundaries and you have the right to enforce your values and criteria.
Completely. The other thing that I was going to say, it slipped my mind and I thought of it 3 times before the squirrel ran away with it now.
Silly squirrels.
Yeah, I know. All right. We'll circle back to it. Realizing setting your boundaries is also a form of caring for yourself. And I know we talk a lot about energy vampires and who's taking your energy, or when they call you and they dump on you, how you're impacted by that, or when you're possibly going to go see that person, how you're impacted by that. And it's something that I've learned, especially, and I do encourage people to do this. If you know somebody that you are going to be talking to them and they are an energy vampire for you, do as much as you can to protect yourself. So if you talk to them with only one earbud in on really low volume, it will help reduce the impact of them pouring stuff on you, and finding other ways, especially if you're on the phone with them and you hold a posture to help you quite literally override the physiology, or override the former physiology of feeling like you didn't have any power. And it's something that is an art and you can practice over time. But being able to protect yourself and say, I can't take all this, that's got to go back to you, is absolutely a form of self-care. One of which I would not have considered a form of self-care, at least in this culture, when they're like, here, have a bubble bath and a candle for your self-care. Hi, gorgeous Fran.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because a major part of that part right there is the awareness, is the becoming aware and recognizing the feeling when you are in the presence of an energy vampire.
For sure.
And some of them are so slick and so sly about it that when it finally does, when you finally do realize it, you're like, oh, no wonder every time I talk to you, you're talking nice, but when you leave, I'm ready for a nap, or I've got a headache, or I walk away and I'm not my happy self anymore. You sucked the happy right out of me. And we didn't even have like an angry conversation. It was just your perception, your ability to be happy about something that sucks. Oh, I was right about, they were so wrong. And you're like, and when you start understanding that these people are there, you can set your own boundaries, like you said, about finding ways to opt out of the conversation, find ways to reframe the conversation, redirect the conversation, whatever it takes to, like we always say, airline rule, put the mask on yourself first, protect your energy first, because you're the one that has to live in your body 24/7 your entire life. And your energy is a precious commodity as well.
I used to think, especially the phrase, and it was just one that had really stuck with me for a while, that self-care is selfish, that you shouldn't be putting yourself first, and you should be putting yourself last, and everybody else comes first. And it was just something that I had taken on really early in life. And I didn't even question it. So anytime I thought I need to protect my energy because I want to feel my best, it was something that I had to build toward to really understand that's okay. I give myself permission to do this because I can't go down for 3 days because I was with somebody or because I know I'm going to be with somebody and I can't take that on. It was just quite literally incredibly chaotic to feel. And the more I became aware of it, the more I thought, okay, what do I need to do to protect myself? How else can I maneuver through this? Because there are people in our lives that we do, for the majority of us do care about, and we don't want to completely veto them from our life. But at the same time, we do want to protect ourselves as much as possible so that the time with them can be more enjoyable versus weighed down and heavy.
And part of that, going back to an analogy or a metaphor, you know me, metaphor man, is getting hit. When you're not expecting it, or you're out in public and somebody hits you, the impact hurts way more than if you get hit inside of a boxing ring. Because there you recognize the environment, you know it's going to come. And you can take much more, even like football players, they've recorded some of, analyzed some of the hits that these guys take, and said that it was the equivalent of being hit by a car anywhere from 15 to 30 miles an hour. And then they get up and they do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. But because of the environment they're in, they've prepared themselves for that hit. So even when you're talking about boundaries and energy vampires and things of that nature, once you recognize that this person has that capacity and propensity to do these things, you can prepare yourself in whatever means it takes to be able to take those hits and go back and recover much quicker. When you're out in public, if you're not ready for it, and all of a sudden you're walking away and you realize it, even then you can be like, oh, that's what it is. That's why when I get people that, say they have headaches and stuff, one of the first things I'll ask them, is it yours or is it somebody else's? Is it like an energy cobweb that you walk through, and a good portion of the time, all of a sudden they're like, wow, this ain't even mine. And it magically disappears.
I think Fran had something to say. Oh, sorry.
Oh, please, no, go ahead. Yeah.
And Fran, I know, wanted to share something.
Well, I was wanting to throw in a curveball in the boundaries, that there's so many boundaries that flow into the unconscious that we're not aware when we're violating either other people's boundaries or they're violating ours. I had an example recently at a meeting that's mainly in the main male domain in my fire brigade world. And certainly until I pointed it out, there were a lot of unconscious interruptions of what I was saying. And this, sorry to bring gender, but this is just an example of the unconscious things that we tolerate because we don't notice they're there. That in meetings, it tends to happen in that sort of environment that men will interrupt females rather than females interrupting men, and we don't object because we don't even see it until it's actually noticed and pointed out. And, I pointed that out to that group, and they're very conscious of interrupting. And kind of like, when you're a mum, everybody comes and interrupts what you're doing. And that's okay, you know, that's tolerated and accepted, and it does violate boundaries, and kids don't understand about boundaries, but it flows to all members of the family that mum's the person who will just drop everything when you need something doing. So all these unconscious boundaries, how do you become conscious of them? How do you know when you're violating or not violating, or being violated with your boundaries? So much is conditioning. Where does conditioning end, and where does awareness of boundaries and saying, no, that won't do, begin? Any thoughts, or do you want to object to what I've said?
I'm in full agreement, and I think some of us are lucky enough to stumble across these teachings, these ideologies, and things of that nature, whether it be through being around somebody who's in the self-help industry or whatever you want to call it, that brings it to light, or witnessing somebody like you, Fran, being able to be in an environment where somebody else actually speaks up about it and creates that. Vast majority of the population is, they, of course, haven't had any exposure to point this out. This has been the way I've been since I was a kid. I've always felt bad about it. I was hated when people interrupted or did these things. But because of my conditioning when I was young, I was told I couldn't do anything about it. And so the best thing we can do is get the word out and teach as many people as possible how to evaluate, how to stand up, how to get access to these ideologies and information. I see that Holly's got her hand up. So, Holly?
Yeah, and I love everything TJ just said too. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. There's a book by, I think the author is Deborah Tannen, about communication, and for some reason I cannot think of what the name of the book is. But she also talks about too just the different communication styles. And so obviously, you know, part of it, men, women might be wired differently. But one of the things she talks about interrupting specifically is that different people have different space that they expect to have between conversation, the space that says, I'm done. And so what you'll have without even knowing it is some people have a very short break. And some people have a very long break. And so the long people are constantly waiting for their chance to talk. And the short people are constantly trying to fill the silence because they think nobody's talking and they want to make sure everybody's having a good time. So one thing is just recognize that's not necessarily something that you can even reprogram, and there isn't a standard that's right, so to speak. But the biggest key, I think, there's a big difference between someone who's consciously, intentionally violating your boundaries and doesn't care, and somebody who inadvertently is going over your boundaries. And I think when it comes to these inadvertent ones, I mean, communicating it and letting them know, hey, I noticed this is getting worse, or, you know, whatever. Having that regular communication is helpful, but also making sure you do it in a kind way and letting him know, you know, this is not personal. I know you're not doing this intentionally. There's immediate forgiveness. And by the way, I know it goes the other way, you know, for any of these, because she also talks about direct communicators versus indirect communicators. And she talks about how she and her husband ended up going to a party because he's an indirect communicator and she's a direct communicator. And so she said what she wanted. She said, I don't really care one way or the other. And he thought that meant I really want to go. And he didn't want to go. And she really genuinely didn't care one way or the other. So they both went to a party, had a miserable time, and it was all due to this miscommunication, you know? So, you know, but saying, oh, I was right, you were wrong. No, we're just different. And we all have differences. And so, you know, when it comes to those unintentional things, we're going to have to recognize it can't be completely controlled. It can't be completely solved. But as long as we're constantly touching base with each other, and as long as we're constantly being forgiving, that handles. But then when they do it intentionally, Now it's time to start calling them out on it in a meaner way, maybe not meaner, but a solider way.
That's beautiful, but I think you raised the point of the unintentional interruption. It's I find it far more difficult to stop somebody when they're doing something unintentionally. You don't want to stop their flow, you don't want to stop their creativity, but you do want to respect your boundaries. So, it kind of leads to me interrupting them interrupting me, or the conversation of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get what you were saying because you interrupt. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you were interrupting me. Somebody came up with a really cool way of saying that, and I've lost it. Sorry, but
I wanted to say, friend, I know exactly what you mean, especially things that are unconscious. I don't know if you remember when you first met me. I used to say sorry all the time. Sorry for talking, sorry for doing this, sorry for doing that, sorry for everything was followed by a sorry, and it was so unconscious. And people really pointed it out to me. What are you sorry for? You didn't get me sick. What are you sorry for? You didn't do this. And so it's things that, and you had asked, how do we start shifting that? And I think it's something, as we become aware of it, we become more aware of it. But you also hear it in people's speech. For example, my mother-in-law will say, you cut me off. Like she will come right out and say, you violated my boundary. And I was in the middle of talking, which I think is a great thing, because people will do it constantly, especially because like, oh, we're a family. It's unconditional love. No, it's still important no matter who you are. So even noticing it in other people's speech, when, especially when you're in those meetings, you'll see the facial expression of, and that right there is that signal. And what I do my best to do is, hold on, they weren't finished. And I will interject to offer that peace as much as possible and as kindly as possible, but to also help that person get what they wanted to communicate and help that other person realize you just cut them off. So I love that question. Elijah.
So I just got here. I don't really know fully what you're talking about.
Hello,
But,
we're talking about cutting people off in conversation.
Like that.
Like that.
Very good. So I have been accused of over speaking and outspeaking my welcome, like the space that I am allowed to speak or given to speak, and that I do, I kind of go too long, and that I interrupt people and that I don't give other people a chance to speak a fair amount. And I never know when I'm doing it. I'm sure I've done it in this meeting many times as well. TJ thankfully has never said anything to me about it, but I have had other people say to me, whoa, you kind of went on a bit and you didn't, and you should be waiting for the second hour when it's a free-for-all, and you went in on the first hour and blah, 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 right? And I actually get a little bit offended and hurt by it, because 9 times out of 10, when I talk long, it's because I'm answering a question. And when I answer a question, I tend to go into detail. And so it upsets me a little bit, because you asked the fucking question. And now you're saying that I'm talking too much. Right? So what's the best way to handle that shit?
And I'm going to jump in and say that's a brilliant question, because I think everybody should answer. How would you like to be interrupted? Or how would you like to be redirected or whatever? I think that's a really valuable question. So can I throw that over to everybody? Because I'm kind of confronted by how I like to be interrupted.
I'll pop in here. So what I have found is when I've done a number of podcasts, and people will share a variety of directions and a variety of expectations with you. And the best one that I heard was, don't talk longer than 2 minutes. And I thought that was a great one because it allows you to come up for air. It allows you also to keep your conversation tighter, cleaner, and more accurately pinpointed if you're in the response to a question. Or if you start with, I have a story, then you can allow yourself more time. But I found that to be a good rule of thumb for myself. And that is what I would like to offer.
Okay, we're getting into, can you guys hear me okay? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
We're nodding. That's what you can't say.
Yeah, no, all the videos of films up, I was gonna shut mine out. But in response to Elijah's comment, I want to point out I find it interesting when some people get their values and criteria offended on behalf of somebody else. The reason, Elijah, that I don't have a problem with you answering is because, one, my ego is in check, and you're adding to Triple T. You are answering. You are giving value to what we're discussing, and that's what I wanted this platform for. But that's why I said I find it interesting. Like, well, I can't believe that it offended me when you did this to him. Well, how did he feel? I don't know. I didn't have a problem. And to answer the other question of how do you deal when people have interrupted you or something like that, I've got a number of different ways. One of them is, oh, that's interesting. So what I was trying to say before you cut in, and I go back to what I was talking about. But that's just a couple of different things that I wanted to bring up. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to have enough reception to be online. So in the event that I do get flipped off by technology, I want to thank you guys for showing up again. It really means a lot to me, and I can't thank you enough. So back to you guys.
It's kind of great because in your absence as host, we could go even longer than 2 hours today.
No, just kidding.
We can't.
You can go as long
we
as you want, as long as you're
bedtime.
recording. I was gonna say, you guys can go as long as you want, as long as the recording is only 2 hours.
It's so funny that everybody knows my bedtime. I'm a pumpkin. I turn into a pumpkin by 9 o'clock.
Well, that determines the length of the meeting. And could I add something about the previous conversation of interruptions, that I regularly get confounded by long pauses, and my habit that when somebody else starts speaking, I tend to stop speaking. So I'm a classic enabler when it comes to interruptions. But when we're doing conversational hypnosis, that's the time I'm really challenged, because you need those pauses to let the other person process. And quite often I think, oh, I've got another train of coming in here, and I can have done on occasion completely messed up that pause for the unconscious moments in conversational hypnosis. So yeah, it happens. But then again, if you're doing it in a group, that you just have to allow for that to a degree.
I'll jump into and hopefully I'm not cutting anybody off on that one. But I will say too, what TJ said about like getting offended on behalf of other people, and a lot of these things are very important. It is important, I think, too, to know the context of where you're at, and are you the host? Are you the one leading the conversation? Do you have a time limit? Do you not have a time limit? Are you sensing that everybody in the room is getting antsy? Like there's different places, but like for instance, if Elijah's responding to me and he's taking a minute, maybe he's telling me something that's going to change my life. And if somebody else is getting mad that he went a little longer than they thought he should, that's I've had lots of times where I felt like Elijah was saying something very profound that I wanted to hear the whole thing. It kind of reminds me of when I played the organ in church, and I had somebody come up after. There are certain people that decide they know how the organ's supposed to be played. And I remember the first time somebody gave me feedback about how I was being irreverent, and actually it happened to somebody else first. What they said to her was, it sounds like you're playing praises to Chloe rather than praises to God. And like, these are things that would take you out for a whole day. I had people telling me I was playing too fast but when I finally got the balance was I started getting complaints both sides. So I'd have people telling me I was playing too loud, and then people telling me I wasn't playing loud enough. People telling me I was playing too fast. People telling me I wasn't playing fast enough. And it suddenly occurred to me, I can't please everybody. And so, once again, I think it goes back to that. I think there needs to be a regular conversation. So if somebody's constantly feeling like they're being cut off, have that conversation, let people know, but also get a feeling and just challenge yourself. Okay, I get cut off a lot in this conversation. That might mean that the pauses here are slower. So if I am feeling uncomfortable, the echo technique they talk about a lot. I'm echoing the group, and the group is that you jump in fast. Okay, maybe it feels like I'm the one that's always jumping in. People are always telling me that I feel like I'm cutting off. Maybe I'll try to go a little bit slower, but at the end of the day, you can't make it perfect. And I think that the key is you have to assume best intent and give forgiveness, and then have the conversation. Make sure everybody feels welcome, feels safe, and feels like they could give that feedback without it being personal. Because that's the other thing too. When it's personal, it's much worse than when it's just, hey, I want to have a better conversation. Let's talk about how we're all being perceived.
You see, I think it's because they're haters. Right? I think it's because they're haters. And they get upset that when I start talking, people start leaning in and really listening. Right? And so they wanna kind of somehow seize back the control, or the center of the stage, or the spotlight, or whatever the word is, right? And so they have a dig at me because they know I'm sensitive to such things. And then I get all self-conscious and retreat into my shell. And for the next 3 weeks, I get people sending me messages going, are you all right? You didn't say that much today. You kind of, you stayed quiet for a while, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't know, dude. At the end of the day, if it wasn't worth sharing, I wouldn't say it. Right? And if I take a little bit longer to explain something, it's because I didn't get the non-verbals that made me see that you understood. So maybe I repeated it a different way. But I don't know. Far be it from me to say that I know what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean?
Fran, did you have something you wanted to say?
I wanted to say brilliant comments all round, and the personal stuff. It's also about feeling the rhythm of the conversation, and getting the measure of the pauses and the pauses of different people, because that was just a prime example. I thought there was a space to talk in, so I spoke, and Elijah also found the same space, and we both spoke at the same time. And that can be, can offend some people because it sounds like we're talking over each other. And I guess we have to accept that we're human and way far from perfect.
Listen, people, Fran and I are actually siblings, and we've been talking over each other since we were toddlers, right? So, nah.
DJ, you were going to pop in?
I also got to point out, remember, opinions are like buttholes. Everybody's got one, and some of them are dirty. And you just, if people are going around putting their opinions all over. You just got to look at some and go, well, sounds like you got a story. But I'm sorry you got hurt, but it sounds like you got a story.
I always heard that as opinions are like buttholes. Everybody has one and nobody wants to hear yours.
It was belly buttons, but okay.
That's a Disney version.
Yes, I tried to keep it somewhat for the recording.
The only other thing about interruptions is if everybody's interrupting, we're having a great conversation because everybody's got something to say. So maybe it's not such a bad thing.
And so was this in the setting of a Zoom conversation or in person?
I think all.
Yes.
Because I thought,
I think that's.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, we're also polite now.
Well, I used to sell life insurance online, and I always spoke with my clients and leads and everything over Zoom. So, and then I, was part of different communities. So I've been enmeshed in Zoom long enough that, and particularly people that are, there where there's a continent in between you, there is a lag time. And so it's just been understood that you're going to talk over somebody and it's not rude. And then you can, go and apologize and yep, go ahead and just defer to, whatever. But if it's really important, then just say, oh, I just need to get this out, blah, 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 and then say it quick and all things like that. And most of the people have that understanding, particularly with international Zoom conversations. In my
And I'm
experience.
glad you brought that up, Kevin, because again, it comes right back to environmental situation. What's the environment that you're in? If it's a bunch of buddies trying to tell their favorite funny story, of course they're going to be jumping in over each other and adding on it and adding the parts in. I think the problem is going right back to boundaries, values, and criteria, and all the above, and whether or not you've been taught it well enough, conditioned well enough, have enough understanding to understand where you're at and what these are affecting. And the other part, that's why it's so important and why I teach all my clients and students about the trifecta: echo, talk, three magic question, values, and criteria. I think those things are so important that they need to be taught worldwide to every human being on the planet right after they learn the words mama and dada. We would have a lot less issues with communication. The problem is they're not. And it's a challenge for those of us that have been taught and understand all these things. When we see the people that are still archaic and just want to, they don't understand boundaries, they don't understand values and criteria, they don't understand so many things in communication. Some of them are simply clueless to etiquette and reading the group energy or anything like that. So, Fran, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say, and though we've learned all these wonderful techniques, have you noticed that as soon as we get really engaged in the conversation and enthusiastic, well, certainly for myself, I forget them all. I'm so engaged in the conversation, they're gone. And I completely forget everything I've learned and all the wisdoms and make all the basic same mistakes again. And I think that's the engagement and the enthusiasm of the conversation, which means that it's a great thing.
I think that you're not giving yourself near the credit you deserve, Fran, for your engagement and remembering this stuff. But it also comes back to practice and practice and practice, because you get to a point where if that's the way you talk, that's the way you talk. And I teach my students and clients again. I say, in the beginning, it will feel so awkward because it's something new. And I tell them it's like learning a brand new language. The best part is you get to use all the words you already know. It's just a different way of utilizing them in conversations.
Just as a little add-on to that and enthusiasm, I think that in general conversations, to use these techniques and to remember them, I have to slightly disassociate from the conversation rather than being, it's a kind of different energy that I'm keeping myself in the conversation and out of the conversation, observing, rather than just being totally immersed in the conversation. And being totally immersed is so joyful and so full of flow that sometimes it's nice to forget everything you know.
Just gonna jump and just say what you just described is I don't know if you're familiar, you probably are, you've got unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence.
Yes. Yep.
When you get to 4, if it's your default, you will default to echo technique. You'll default to 3 magic questions, and you may be there and not even realize you're there. But when you're in that place of conscious competence or even conscious incompetence, that's when you have to dissociate with what you're doing. But if you practice it enough, you will get to conscious incompetence, whether you realize you got there or not. So it's just a matter of practicing and getting there and giving yourself credit when you get there.
I think also, Fran, when you do separate a little bit, I think it's a dance, because you're also then using your tools and you're working it in an effective way. It's not, hold on, let me flip through the book and figure out what I'm doing. You're incorporating it more and more because you see those opportunities of, oh, this will work really well here.
And I think there's also words and there's energy. And this is when, you can echo with energy as well as with words. So, that's part of the dance too. It doesn't all have to be verbal.
Yes.
Completely agree.
And I want to say, Holly beat me to that by just, that's exactly what I was going to point out. And one of the things I do for my students and clients is when we're conversing and I hear them start to do a good echo, I point it out. I'm like, oh, that was a good echo. And the funny part is, at first they're like, thank you. And then a little bit later, they're like, oh, really? Like, yeah, that was a great echo. I didn't even know I did it. I said, that's what I want to know. That's what I want to hear, is when it gets to a point where that's how you talk and you're not aware of it at all.
Yeah, I've had that also with some people in my class and that, where I will say to them, oh, that was an excellent suggestion. I don't know if you did that on purpose, or if I don't know if you're, and I will give a suggestion back as well. So I'll be like, oh, that was an excellent suggestion. I don't know if you're starting to do that on purpose, or if you just, if it just slipped out, but it was an excellent suggestion nonetheless. And half the time they don't realize that they gave a good suggestion, but sometimes they do, and that's cool.
And it brings up the awareness and reinforces it, which allows it to be done even easier the next time.
Yeah.
All parts of being agents of change. Yeah.
Any other questions about this topic?
What's the topic?
It had beautifully snowballed and unfolded and traveled in the most spectacular ways. It started out with boundaries.
Oh, right. Interrupting. I remember now. I remember now. Yeah, interrupting is also a skill when you're the, let's say, the operator and not the client. Yeah, then interrupting is a skill.
Very interesting. All right. Do you
So
want to
tell
do?
us
Oh, go ahead.
Can
Go for it,
we
Fran.
can we share some of the benefits of interrupting and where it's useful and where it's beneficial?
Yeah,
Elijah,
definitely.
you were starting on that
I
topic.
think it's useful to stop people going down the old path that they always go down, right? So like let's say you're in the process of helping someone um create a new behavior, right? Instead of, because a point will come where like I might ask them, okay, and then what is it about X that you don't like? And instead of just answering like, oh, it's ugly or it stinks or I don't like how it's coming at me or it gives me this queasy feeling, they will say one of those things and then they'll say, and then, and it's like they doing the chain, right? And I didn't ask for the whole chain. I just asked for that one bit. So then it's very important to interrupt someone and be like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Like, I just wanted to know what it was about X that you didn't like, right? If you could tell me that in 3 words, what would it be? Kind of thing. So you can interrupt in that regard, like very blatantly, very obviously. And also you can kind of interrupt by, do you see how that worked? There was a moment when
Your
I
long
paused
pause.
and I'm kind of like just playing with my lower lip here like this, and everyone's waiting for me to say something. But in that moment, while you're waiting for me to say something, it's like you're all tuned in and you're all paying attention and you cleared your mind of whatever the thought was that you were having because you're waiting on what I'm about to say. And that, in a sense, by having you clear your mind and kind of hang on my words, is an interrupt. It's a state break, which I'm kind of counting state breaks and interrupts as the same thing. Harley?
I love everything Elijah just said, by the way. I think that definitely is part of it. Something else I found useful, this is more from a managing a meeting kind of perspective. There's 2 things that I'm going to throw in. One, I'm going to pick on Lenora a little bit because you'll see she was doing it today a lot. When you see somebody interrupt somebody else, maybe note this is the person that needs to have a follow-up and actually call them when the time is right to make sure they have a chance to talk. But something else I do is I will name my interrupters and I will pre-frame them at the beginning of a meeting with a group, or, if it's the same group, they may already know. And so, for instance, I'll say, okay, for a study group, I want to have a combination of, we're learning material, but I also think it's good for us to bond as a group. I think both of those add to learning, and also it gives us a chance to discuss how this works in real life. But we need a balance of that, and I want to make sure when you get to the end of this meeting, that I've respected your time, that you can, go eat, all that sort of thing, and also that we've actually covered real material. So I want to let you know there's this person, I call her Taskmaster Holly, that if I notice the conversation is starting to get to the point where it's interrupting with class, she's going to come in and she's going to interrupt. And I want you to know that doesn't mean I don't find your story interesting, because I actually do. I love all these stories. But it means that I just want to make sure we're actually getting in material before the end of class. And then that way, because I've pre-framed it, I've named her, then when the time comes that I feel like I need to interrupt because the conversation is getting hijacked, I will say, I'm really sorry, I'm loving this conversation, but Taskmaster Holly needs to interrupt right now because we just need to make sure we're covering what our goals were for the session.
That's so good.
It's amazing.
That's so good.
I love it, and I can see Holly with big boots and a whip, and I love you in that, guys. And remember that pattern interrupt is a really effective technique in a lot of situations. And even with, I need to tell a little story, sorry, so give me a little bit of space, please. This is relevant to, I was having a conversation about with a man about how he was actually experiencing abuse. And it reminded me of a story of my brother when I was a teenager. My brother used to tease me mercilessly until I absolutely exploded. And being a volatile teenager, I would actually lunge at him with my claws out for his eyes. And because he was much bigger and stronger than me, he'd just grab my wrists and he'd hold them there with me trying to attack him. And he'd gradually push me to the ground and hold me there until I was exhausted and couldn't scream and yell at him anymore. And it was such an effective pattern interrupt. And I guess it did teach me that I could learn to manage my temper a little bit better. So there are more ways that you can do physical interrupts, maybe not quite as dramatically than that, but even movements can be quite an effective pattern interrupt. I'm done.
And by the way, Fran, you don't have to say you're sorry for stories in this environment. That was awesome. And thank you, Holly, for I call them squirrel herders. In my world, another appropriate time for interrupting is when you have the quiet people who don't like to speak up and get talked over. There have been a number of times they'll be like, awesome. Fran, you're going to say something. When you're paying attention to the dynamics of the group, that certain people that, I can talk for Elijah both talk for hours and hours and hours. So the ability to keep an eye on other people and make sure that they get their chance to give their opinions, their stories, and time as well. And I think that's part of being a dare I say, a good leader, especially when it comes into a conversational room.
And I think that's wonderful, interrupting you, that sometimes we create that space for the quieter people in the group to actually be able to talk. And that's when I borrow Holly's big boots and her whip and create the space. I like the image of big boots and a whip for certain circumstances, especially at meetings.
That was a great echo, by the way. So.
And everybody pauses now.
So, okay, I have one that's different.
Go for it.
Okay. New thread.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I was listening to some Neville Goddard, right? And he said that the idea of just being is like the purest separation of yourself from yourself, right? Just like I am, and that's it. Not I am Elijah, or I am hypnotist, or I am whatever. Just I am. And that it's possible to forget who I am, where I am, or even what I am, but it's not possible to forget that I am. So like, even if I wake up in a hospital with amnesia and I don't know who I am or where I am or how I got to where I am, I still know that I am something, right? And that if you can get in touch with this I am and separate your observing self of that you are this thing, the being that you are, from everything else that is attached to that, including your mind, then you will find, I don't even know if it was something that you find. It was like, then you have like the truest connection between you and God, source, the Tao, whatever it is you want to call it. Yeah. How do we feel about that? And do we think that just continually repeating I am, and meditating on I am and nothing more beyond I am can actually do that for us?
I have to jump in here.
Okay,
That
please.
this is the absolute heart of where all my sort of hypno meditations lead. It's just going to what's underneath that, and what's underneath that, and what's underneath that. And just by deepening the focus and changing the focus, you can reach that real deep quiet I am, the part of you that's God and connected with God. So, or whatever you call God, your divine source. And Elijah, thank you for pointing that out. That those words really touched me. Thank you.
Yeah, I never even considered it. Someone recommended reading Neville Goddard, and I'm not one for reading, but I'm one for listening to audiobooks. And so I found this collection of like 10 of his books in one. And so I downloaded it and I listened to the first one last night, and I can't get it out of my head. Throughout today, all of today, I was just walking around going, I am, and trying to let go of everything that could possibly follow. So I am, and then my brain wanted to say I am cold, or I am hungry, or I am getting tired, or I am whatever. But I was just like, no, just I am. And the more I thought about I am, and kind of separated everything else other than just me being, then at some point it becomes easy to choose a desire and say that desire after the I am. So I could say maybe I am healthy, right? And you see, because he talked about, like, he did a lot of, I'm not very religious, but he did a lot of Bible talk in this book, okay? And what he was saying was, I hope this conversation doesn't upset people. I'm going to talk a little bit about Bible stuff, right? What he was saying is God is consciousness within you, right? And when you say that you are, and you separate everything else besides your being, that you are being and being consciousness, then you are fully connected to God, right? And at that point, when you speak, it's like in the Bible, and God said, like, let there be light, or let there be, and so you would say I am, and you would choose a desire like health, and you would say I am healthy. And so then you would have to, like they say in the Bible, they would say you have to be reborn, which would mean in this case that you would have to die in the sense of all the things that you know yourself to be up until this point that are not in harmony with you being healthy, which is the you being reborn in that new way. You have to kind of let go of all of that and let go of all of your old being and who you were to become this new thing. And that's how you manifest, right? I can't really explain it because I only kind of listened to it once and I need to listen to it again, but it's a very, like, as a non-religious person, just if I just think of it as separating myself from everything, getting down to pure consciousness, and then choosing a desire, and then killing the old parts of me that are not in harmony with that new desire, that might be a really cool way to manifest stuff alongside of what we already know. TJ.
Well, you can't see me raise my hand because we're in the middle of night now. But I'm so glad you brought this up, because leaving it simply as the statement of I am, so many of our clientele and the people that are around us don't understand the difference between an identity of something they are and something they do. And they'll finish, I am a smoker. Really? So are you on fire right now, or are you smoking, or do you smoke? And when you get them to start watching, right back to language, separation between something they identify with and something that they do is another step. And I love that you brought up this. How about if you just keep saying I am, and not having the identity attachment to it right away? Getting used to the possibilities of what could be there, and then picking and choosing healthier options. Like you pointed out, I am healthy. Graham?
And this leads you into Elijah's wonderful temporal manipulations perfectly. How cool is that when you do your time, your time tricks and manipulations? Elijah, I can't even remember off the top of my head how it goes, but
That was too quick for you.
It was. There you go. But the I am just leads into that so perfectly.
Yeah, especially so today I really found myself rejecting anything that wanted to follow the word am. Right? So I would I would just say to myself, I am. And then my mind would want to fill in the next word, like overweight, or I am feeling a little bit cold, or I am, not saving enough money, or and I just pushed them all away every single time. And what was left was this feeling of I am, and then all this potential and this ability for me to choose what it is I want to be. But I hadn't chosen any of them. And when you're in that place where you just are being and have no attachment to what you are being, just being purely, then when you think about the options that are in front of you or that you could take, from that place, none of them really seemed hard or difficult. And it's a very strange sensation, Holly, you got your hand up.
Actually, I think Lenora had her hand up before me. Did you want to go first?
That's okay. I'll wait.
Okay. Well, in that case, oh, that's weird. I've never seen that before. So I think you're definitely onto something. Just a couple things to add. First of all, I don't know if this is absolutely true, but I've been told that Om means I am in Sanskrit. I know when they were interpreting, at least in the King James Version of the Bible, when they were translating it, whenever the Tetragrammaton was in there, if you don't know what that is, go ahead and look. That was usually translated as I am in the Bible. Sometimes they put a word in italics next to it, which meant they were adding it. But I am was the translation for that. As we know in NLP, one of the highest levels is I am. So if you say I am, you will usually manifest it. And then also, when I've been learning languages, one of the approaches they suggest is find the 2,000 most common words, or if it's more complex, it might be more than 2,000. But I am, or some version of to be, is usually the most common word in almost all languages. So, I mean, this I am concept is definitely the foundation of creation. It's definitely very, very important. I don't know how deep it goes, but I can tell it's one of the top principles of how the universe is governed, the principle of I am. There's definitely something there.
Brilliant.
I do love that, Holly. I was listening to somebody the other day, and I found it to be very true when when I think it's pretty sure it's in the Bible when they say it's been within you all along. You have the answers, and using other people as your guide to help see what resonates with you is helpful, but ultimately how it flows through you is the ultimate. That is your key because it's within you. So when Elijah was saying I am, it just seemed to really resonate with you. And that I think is a great thing, especially you had talked about Hakalau for a number of times, right? So I'm wondering, even if you do that as you're holding I am, what other things might come up? Anybody else want to pop in?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Part of that dropped out a little bit. But one thing came to mind was also the importance of opening up all the options. When you utilize I am and realize the importance with it, and like Holly beautifully pointed out, how prevalent worldwide and historic that statement is. I think we also need to make sure that we look at, like I point out, always at least 3 solutions to every event, situation, or problem that may occur. When we're going through the IMs and looking for better ways to improve ourselves through that statement, how can we relabel, or, again, back to me, nothing means anything until you give a label. How can we make sure that we take the time to look at least 3 options and raising the frequency because we can? And then working with other people, to point coaches, head coaches, and stuff like that. One interesting deal I saw about going to the gym was when people are lifting weights, they will actually lift 10% more on average if they have a spotter. Simply, in my thoughts on this is, it'd be a combination of safety and combined energies. Just the squirrel dropped that off, so I wanted to throw that in.
I absolutely love that. So I had written down a couple of things for tonight, and one of them, it's so beautifully, and Holly often says this, that the Triple T had just weaved in questions that she was looking for and answers that she had needed, and that is completely what's happening with this topic right now. So I was watching something, and this person was bowing, and they were practicing the art of bowing and giving thanks to the universe for being here. And I thought that was such an interesting shift, because we can often be like, oh my God, life is so terrible. And all this chaotic thing, all the chaotic things that are going on. But the fact that this person was repeatedly doing these bows and giving thanks was breathtaking to me. And when I had also heard ultimately that the answer is kind of got the connection of everything is within you. What I wrote down earlier was, when you feel that energetic alignment and you feel that emotion that some of us may even call, like, it brings you to happy tears, that is that connection, that soulful connection that is moving your soul forward in so many areas. And I feel like I could not have put words to that until tonight. So I love that this conversation is flowing in the way that it is, and really just understanding that it is a gift to be here. And also, the more inward you go, the higher you rise. And I love, TJ, that you pointed out that people lift more when they have a spotter. I've hands down the life-changing experiences that I have had because I have chosen to put certain people in place, and I've chosen to work with certain people and have them as my coaches and have them as my friends and my guides, but also even a number of coaches working with them is so staggering that I can't possibly explain to you how life altering it is. And I love that you pointed that out, because even here tonight, it's like having somebody spot you at the gym. It's having that support. Go for it, Fran.
I love what you say, Lenora, and being thankful to be here, even though it sometimes looks like the world's going to hell in a handcart. And the Chinese curse of may you live in interesting times. Well, we do live in interesting times, but goodness, aren't we lucky to be here experiencing these interesting times, to actually experience good, bad, indifferent, what's going on. And yes, we do have the answers within us, but to change the focus, to actually be thankful for every moment, good and not so good, to actually have this opportunity to experience it in a physical body. What a privilege that is. And what are the chances that brought us here? The chances that we were the ones that were selected to actually to have our egg fertilized and to be born, to be us. What are the chances of you being here, right now? And what the heck are you going to do to take advantage of this huge privilege now?
Amen.
Love that.
And that's why people that know me well also know that I constantly, how's it going? I will answer, it's another day in paradise. And, you get pushed back about this, that, and the other. And A, it's a mindset, it's a choice. But B, there will always be a worse option. And so today, this is my paradise. Is it perfect? No. But there are some people that would give up a body part to have the life I have right now, to have the day that I'm having right now. Even on my worst days, they would still do that. And I'm human. There are days that my human side pops out and I'll go around grumbling and I'm angry and blah, 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 blah. But I have more good days than I've ever had because of the stuff that I've learned and stuff I've gone through, and my ability to go in the quantum of possibilities. Worst case scenario has just as many options and possibilities as best case scenario. Every flower garden has a weed, and it's all going to depend on which one you stare at and which one you feed and water the most.
Well said. Anybody else want to pop in?
We've kind of dealt with life, the universe, and everything. So what more is there to say?
I don't know if we wanted to start a new thread or if we wanted to continue this one. I do love that we did talk about life in the universe. So awesome thread choice, Elijah.
It's like So do you guys know what the classic suggestion effect is?
I don't know if I'd formally say I know what the classic suggestion effect is, as in
Okay.
define it, but if you say it, I may be like,
So-
oh yeah.
The classic suggestion effect is that when a subject who's in hypnosis, their subjective experience is that whatever's happening in the trance is happening on its own, and that it's not them that's doing it. It's probably maybe it's a part of them or another part of them that they, a subconscious part of them or something, but they consciously, if it's like an arm levitation thing where your arm lifts and rises slowly over time, right? That it's not them doing it. The arm is going on its own, right? And what happens when you have that effect is people have this idea within themselves that they are convinced that, oh, something's happening and it's not me doing it, so it must be something, it must be, the hypnosis must be real, kind of thing. And then it becomes much more effective because now they've had this piece of evidence that says that it's not them and something else that's doing it, and so they buy into it even more. And that, I think, is kind of a little bit what TJ was getting at right now, that if you can somehow convince yourself of this stuff, right, that if I could convince myself, if I say I am and I am and I am, and I get into this whole kind of separating myself from all my flaws and all my insecurities, and I just am being, and then I said I had this feeling that, I looking at all the various potentials and none of them seem difficult. That is like it's an effect that's happening within my subjective experience that's convincing me that I'm actually quite a powerful being, and therefore, and also like great, this idea of being grateful, like what Fran was saying about, oh, you won the race with all the other sperms, and then all the different variables in life, and somehow we ended up here on a call together. A chance is like 1 trillion to 1, or maybe less, right? That we would all be here right now. And so if you then have that experience, that subjective experience within yourself, that this is a gift and that you could be grateful for it, then you would buy even more into it because that's your experience, right? Now, here is the most amazing thing about the classic suggestion effect. It's that you can suggest it. So as a hypnotist, I could say, let's say I'm doing arm levitation with someone, I could say, feel that arm lifting and rising and notice how it's happening all by itself. So I could suggest to the person that they would have the effect that it's happening by itself without them doing it. And then when that happens, they will be more convinced that it was real. So is it possible to suggest to myself that I'm feeling more grateful because I'm noticing things around me that are cool in life, right? And that I was noticing them all by myself without me telling myself to notice them.
I think that's
Right?
entirely possible.
Right. So then I would start to notice things without knowing that I told myself to notice things. And the fact that I was noticing them naturally would make me buy into the fact that I'm having a good life and I should be feeling more grateful. And then that would lead to a chain reaction of me being more grateful, and so on and so forth.
Completely, so on and so forth.
That sounds kind of cool, no?
That sounds pretty
So how do I
cool
trick
and damn
myself
awesome.
into doing that?
Notice that you're not tricking yourself into anything.
No, you're not. It's just a suggestion.
Well, I'm
You
just
don't have
pointing
to
out
follow
that
the suggestion.
it might be a suggestion to notice that it's not a trick and that it's a choice.
It is okay. I'm going to let Brian speak.
Well, I was going to say what you're talking about is almost like what people tell. I have heard that people talk about when they've had a near-death experience, that it's like being given a whole new chance. And so it's wiped the slate completely clean, that you can now leave that old person behind and choose how you're going to make your life count, how you're going to be grateful for every moment, how you're going to notice all the reasons why you are grateful for everything that's happening right here, right now, and how you can actually hypnotize yourself into having a similarity of a near-death experience so that you can actually see the world differently, that from this moment forward, you really can choose what and who you are and make every breath on earth count now.
I love that, Fran.
And Ken Guzzo in California is doing that right now. That's one of his new protocols, is he literally is hypnotizing clients into what is basically a near-death experience, and coming out and going, okay, now that you've got the slate clean, what are you going to do with your life now? And if I understand correctly, they talk about what they wish they would have done or what they would like to be doing, all the above. And those are put into the suggestions for them to move forward and focus on, to get rid of the old habits.
That's awesome. What I was gonna say, for even near-death experience, but also one thing I found, Elijah, and for everybody in the group, don't know any of your background, giving myself permission, using the word permission as often as I possibly can. You would be surprised how many times I have to recognize, or if I'm noticing resistance, I pull up permission, because there is such a resistance going on that until I get that permission, that it changes the game. Like you're deep in thought, Elijah.
And here's one that popped up in our conversation yesterday, was also giving yourself permission to grieve over things that didn't go right, and being able to move forward from that. Just like when I lost my photography studio, my property, and all my stuff in Minnesota in 2007, I crawled right into survival mode. It had never occurred to me, the concept of grieving for the loss of the business property. And when that was brought up and I actually understood it and did it, the literally it was one of those days where the weight that fell off should have been recorded on a Richter scale, because it was immense.
And grieving
And
for
I've
things.
had to share that with a number of my clients. But go ahead, Fran. It's okay.
There was one of those classic interrupts. Also grieving for things that haven't yet materialized, or that you had hoped for that aren't going to happen. Giving yourself permission to grieve for that, because we tend to stuff those down, and that's really important.
Amen. Holly had her hand up.
Just jump in on this concept of permission. I think it's always interesting that we think we have at least two options in any situation, and it might be action, it might be lack of action, whatever it may be. I think it's interesting that we would ever explore the possibility that we need permission to do one thing, but we never explore the fact that who gave us permission to do the other option? Who was it that gave you permission not to take time to grieve? Who was it that gave you permission to let yourself go last and not take care of yourself? And there is a thing, you know, we're all wired. We have one side that we think we need permission to do, and one side that is just our default that we think that not only we're allowed to do, but that we have some kind of obligation to do. But the truth is, we may not really deserve to have permission to do the opposite version either.
You know, this was something that Fran had mentioned early on when she had said, where does it start? You know, when people interrupt and it's just naturally a part of the culture, I think certain things are just, that's what you saw, that's what you learned, that's what you picked up, that's what you carried forward, and you didn't even question it until, oh my God, 30 something years later.
And now that we have that knowledge, where can we take this and what can we move past? And I'm glad that Fran brought up the concept of grieving the stories that didn't happen. I'm dealing with that with a number of clients in the relationship department, because they meet this person and, oh my goodness, they're perfect. And all of a sudden the mask starts falling off and they realize that they're not a 10, they're a 7 or a 6 or 5. And they start beating themselves up, or they start feeling bad about it because of the movie or the story that they had created for the future. And when that story falls apart, they don't understand that it's okay to grieve for the loss of that story. But you can accept the fact that the story that I created of who this person was or what our future was didn't happen. Okay. Lay that story to rest. You can have a grieving period for it. But then it's time to go back to the drawing board, and you can create a new story for who you are, which is why I have my clients in the relationship stuff writing their journals about who their person is. And basically, in essence, they're writing the next story, the new story, and helping them to focus on the future, not the alternate one that passed away. Does that make sense?
Definitely. You know, it's so interesting when, Fran, I love that you pointed out grieving for things that haven't materialized. And I was sharing with somebody earlier today that for the longest time, I could not literally future pace beyond 3 months, beyond 6 months. I almost had like setting goal trauma, because when I would set a goal or when I would do something and other people would look at it, they would shame it, they would guilt it, they would red mark it all over the place. And I stopped writing stuff down for the longest time. And I did not realize up until just as I was going through writing some things with other people. And when they would proofread it, when they would check in on it, they were offering little tweaks. They weren't reading it. They weren't crumbling it up and throwing it on the floor as previous people have done when I've shared things with them. And I had no idea, but now that I'm looking back going, oh, that makes so much sense. Why I hated to write stuff down, because if I told other people my goal and I didn't accomplish it, I was sharing it with the wrong people. Why didn't you do that? Why can't you hold up to this? Why are you so stupid? Why are you such a failure? Da-da-da-da. And they're just going on and on and on about why I couldn't do something. And it was like, okay, great. Now I feel like shit. And now I don't want to tell anybody anything. So I went to the complete other extreme. So when you're talking about grieving things that haven't materialized, that was huge, because when I did start to write goals down, things are materializing, and things that haven't materialized yet that I thought they would have in the past, is just so many lights right now. So thank you for sharing.
I have to add on to that with you talking about writing things down and goal setting. I hate landmark. I don't know whether other people have been involved in Landmark, but one of the protocols that was really useful that they enabled was when you feel you've got a tragic story and that life hasn't gone right for you, they encouraged you, write it all down, and then read it to somebody, not just once, twice, 3, 4 times, 10 times. And by the time you've read it a few times to somebody, your tragedy, you're rolling around laughing. It's ridiculous, but that's just the effect, because you're just so connected to start off with to your tragic story and all the things that have gone wrong. But by the time you've read it through with feeling 3 times, you start finding the funny side of it. You start finding the ridiculous bits of it. And it honestly has you paying yourself laughing after a few readings. So, it totally neutralizes your tragic life and all the goals that you may have set that have traumatized you that didn't happen.
Oh my God, I've never heard of this. And I'm over here thinking, like, wouldn't that re-traumatize somebody? I'm thrilled that people are having great experiences with this. Wow.
It's giving you the ability to step back and see that you thought it was, when you're associated with it, it's tragic, but there is a funny side to everything, even really bad stuff. And it is effective and it works. I have been there, done it, witnessed it, witnessed other people telling the most heartbreaking stories and rolling around laughing because they somehow got this human experience and they've had survived. And this again reiterates TJ's perspective. You're still alive. You got here.
Yeah.
What a privilege. And how every moment can be a privilege. It's just how we look at it, how we record it, how we file it. And we don't have to file it as a tragedy, even if it was a tragedy.
Well,
So I can.
I'm so
You go.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the other part that I love about that, and I'm full witness on this. When you write those things down and read them out and look at it, and you have gratitude for where you are at this moment in time, it shows you what it took. It shows you the silver thread it took to get you there. A lot of people know my story, so I don't have to go in depth, but the things that I've gone through, that I've survived, that brought me here today to know you guys. Awesome! Because if one of those things had not happened, just one of them, there's a very good chance that I wouldn't know any of you right. That's how lightly stacked all of those events were on a very thin silver thread. And sometimes it takes that retrospect into, wow, I survived all of that, and look where it got me today. And look where I can go with it tomorrow. Right.
And it's not just the writing of it, it's the reading it out that somehow dissociates you in a different level, and it just loses its power over you by those actions.
Absolutely.
It's much stronger in your mind than it is in the world, right?
Totally agree.
Like, let's say that I was embarrassed about something, and that something I kept a secret because I was embarrassed about it, but I didn't let people know. It would build up and kind of become let's say, pressurized in my mind and become a bigger and bigger deal because I would have to go to greater and greater lengths to keep it hidden. Right? But once you pop that bubble even once you've spoken it out loud even once, it's like all that pressure, like letting air out of a balloon, it just, and it goes flat, right? And then even if it's not fully healed at that point, the next time you speak it out loud, it becomes easier and easier and easier until, like Fran said, by the time you've told 10 people, you start thinking to yourself, as you're telling the story for the 10th time, you're like, was I really bothered by this for that long? Like, I can actually attest to this, right? I have had an experience where, you know, there's a story which led to my depression. And I was depressed a long time, like 9 years I was depressed, okay? Long ass time. And I didn't tell anybody that story till many years afterwards, the incident, I mean, right? And, you know, by this point, I've probably told that story to maybe 20 people in my life, right? And it's really just not a big deal anymore, right? And on top of that, it's like what TJ was saying about, had I not gone through that, I wouldn't be here. That's another thing. So the thing that was causing the depression was that I had this video on loop, like a GIF, right? It's like a 20-second GIF of the worst, most painful experience I had, and it was on loop in my mind, right? And I was focused on that one 20-second bit of timeline, right? And judging myself as having failed and being no good and being worthless and having no value and all that stuff based on those 20 seconds. But what if, and this is one of the timeline tricks that Fran was talking about before, what if I was to expand that 5 years in either direction and then judge it as a 10-year period? Is it still as bad as it was in those 20 seconds? No, actually, within those 10 years, I progressed a lot, right? I went from being this teenager who had no money to being this successful dude who was, learning all this cool stuff and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that's my testimony. Everything you're saying so far is true, and I have experienced it. I have lived it.
Brilliant, Elijah. I've got a couple of other bits to add into this. That remember that all these terrible things that may have happened actually have made you a more compassionate and a better person here now today than you ever would have possibly been without the poop happening to you. And when I'm in a group like this, and I want you to listen to this for you, I actually hear myself very often coming out with divine truths which scare the pants off me because I'm hearing them coming out of my mouth. And all of you do it all the time. And somehow this sort of a group actually brings out our ability to speak truth, real, pure truth and love. And I just thank you for this place, this opportunity, this platform where I can connect with my I am and speak as I am.
Amen.
Okay, group hug. I love you all. All right, got me right in the feels. Can't see it because it's pitch dark here, but yes, 100% agree. The other cool part that I wanted to add to this, as agents of change, how cool is it when we get to help other people that trust their change work with us with these types of things? And how profound is it when we get people that come to us, because the universe works that way, to deal with issues that we're probably dealing with because we're humans and have experienced life. And in the act of healing them, like you pointed out, Fran, words of advice come out of our mouth that we needed to hear. It's like, oh, that's on both of us. So, yes. I love you guys. That gives us 14 minutes left of
Oh,
topics of love.
I had a
still
question
timing?
for the group. What were you
Okay.
saying, Elijah?
I was gonna say I don't know if it's gonna take you. I hope you remember your question because I might talk for a minute. I was gonna say how cool is it also when we can go the other way, TJ? When we like I'm someone who knows how to help people and I like to help people and I get a kick out of using my techniques that I've learned and I really enjoy seeing the changes and stuff. But how cool is it when I find a place where I feel safe enough to let other people help me? Do you know what I mean? Right? Because for the longest time, I was like, I can't let someone help me who's not better at hypnosis than I am. I was so guilty of it. Like, I can't let someone else help me who's not better. Like, I have more experience than this person. And so how could they possibly help me? Because I'm going to be able to see through all their things that they're doing. But it's not true. You could have someone who doesn't even know hypnosis, who's just a human being who has their own experience, be able to put their perspective as an overlay on your problem, and you can suddenly start seeing things a completely different way. So then you can, like, basically, I learned that anyone could be a healer, right? Assuming you have identified a space where it's okay for you to open up and show them your soft underbelly, vulnerable bit, and that they, hold the space and are like genuinely wanting to help you, then you can find it anywhere. So, if
That
you
is
don't
very true.
wanna reach out to one of us, which you can anytime, right? But if you don't want to, just find someone you trust and talk to them and they will help you. Because people are not as mean as you might think.
I would agree with that.
So you had a question for the group.
I do. So I'm writing a speech and the person that I'm working with, she's absolutely lovely. And she had shared that she would like me to be a bit more vulnerable in my speech. So the fact that you guys are sharing this is great. And I love it. What do you do when people closest to you will then say something about your story rather than, wow, I'm glad you're okay? That they'll criticize it.
The hell with them.
I'll jump in on that. I think there's two ways that I kind of approach this. First of all, there are certain people, I think I've said this one a million times before, but there are people who have earned the right to be a part of my journey. And there are people who are just allowed to be on the, outside of my life when I have time for them. So if it's on a one-on-one situation, I am only going to be vulnerable with the people who've, it's a certain level. You've earned a certain level of vulnerability in a one-on-one situation. Now it gets a little different though when you're talking to a group. And so what I have to remind myself with the group, first of all, if it's something that you know you're not ready to share yet, usually that's going to be something you haven't maybe worked through yet, you don't have to share a thing. But keep in mind, there will be people in that group that are going to criticize, that are going to talk back. But there were also people in that group that are going to have their lives changed by what you just shared. And, you know, it's worth it to share it for the people whose lives will change and to ignore the people who, you know, if they were in my life, I wouldn't share that one-on-one. But just remember to focus on the positives. Every time you get, you know, they talk about that 7-to-1 ratio. Have people give you that good feedback and go back and reread it when you get the bad stuff to inoculate yourself against it, because it's going to hit you. But if you've got enough positive to counteract it, it won't hit as hard.
Mm-hmm. The hands. And
Took me a minute to find the mute button. You know, I really understand that, and I have struggled with that in regard to a couple of projects. But I guess what I finally come to my conclusion is two things. In some cases, you can pick your audience. And I understand that's not true in all cases. But the other thing is that the people who criticize, they're doing that from the place that they're at. The place that they're at is the place they're at. They're stuck where they're stuck. If they can't see the beauty, if they can't see the value, if they can't understand the struggle, they just can't. And it really isn't any reflection whatsoever on where you are, what you're doing, and what you're saying. And I think it's likely, to some small degree, to make a difference in their life in some point in the future when they are ready. But it is a little bit, I don't know if unrealistic is the right word, to expect everyone to be at a place of the same spiritual shoot, I just lost the word. The same place, either intellectually, emotionally,
advantage.
Maturity.
Oh yes, all the above. I'll take all of it. You can't expect them to be at the same place. I mean, everybody isn't, and everybody shouldn't, and everybody won't be. So regardless, some of what you say will fall on deaf ears, and those deaf ears are living in enough pain that they think that they should criticize or correct or whatever. They're just not at that same place that you are spiritually, emotionally, or psychologically. And to gear or adjust your truth, I think the highest for me, one of the things that I've come to a conclusion about is that truth is ultimate, in that who are we if we don't speak our truth? It's not your truth. It's not her truth. It's not his truth. It's my truth. And there is absolutely nothing more powerful on the planet, in my opinion, than coming to speak your truth. It's vital. It's critical. And it's just a fact of life that everybody isn't going to get it, as I have said earlier, for a lot of different reasons. So it takes a lot of bravery. You've probably, what's her name? Brene Brown. You know, it's the people who climb into the ring. And, you know, it's not the naysayers and the criticizers and the second guessers in the cheap seats. It's the people who actually climb into the ring to fight the good fight, win, lose, or draw, that deserve the applause. And I think that coming from that place and recognizing your bravery, recognizing the value of truth from a really deep spiritual human perspective might help you understand or accept or not put too much importance on the criticizers and the cheap seats.
That's wonderful.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And thank you, Linda. That was wonderful. Now, I want you all to recognize about vulnerability being so close to the I am, the divine I am, and that the divine I am accepts you exactly as you are, with all your deepest truths that you're not going to share in this environment. And when you're in that space, you're okay with not being okay. And when you're in that space, it makes other people accept themselves. And that's the precious gift that you bring them. And you may want to adjust your story, because you've only got a limited amount of time, to choose parts of your vulnerability that are not going to affect your professional career or tools that other people can use to really hurt you. But if you are brave enough to be okay with not being okay, you are walking your divine I am and giving the gift of helping other people be okay with not being okay. That's your gift.
Thank you, all of you. Very, very much. All right, everybody help. Thank you.
And I think you kind of know how I feel about this. So, again, I'm so honored to be in the presence of all of you guys. And in response to the part of the vulnerable part of the story, that the reason that is in those talks, those speeches, is it shows that you have human, and builds that and right back to the saying that you can't say the wrong thing to the right people, you can't say the right thing. But getting up in front of people like that and showing them that you have that human side, you've had those experiences, even if they don't have an absolutely direct, same type of story, they have feeling. They understand the situation, story they've had with you, and when you touch that feeling, you're worth listening to.
Lenora, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for creating such a powerful session that we have really touched the divine and brought down the heaven to earth. So thank you for your energy and the space you created to make that happen, and everybody here.
For
I
sure,
honor you.
everybody. Thank you so much. I know it's 8:59. TJ, are you there?
If I could just say the same thing that Fran said in one word. Dude.
You guys are the best. Thank you all so much for being here and for investing your time with each other and with us and with me, and thank you very, very much.
I want to thank Lenora for stepping in while I'm out here on the road and living life, doing things, and making sure that this platform keeps rolling as seamlessly as it can, because there's always three solutions to every problem. This one worked out so well. What an amazing, awesome session this one was. I thank you guys so much. Can't see it because I'm in pitch black, because we're out in the middle of God's country. But as always, I never get tired of saying it. Thank you for sharing the precious commodity of time, because I cannot return it to you. I can't replace it. So for you to selfishly take this commodity and share it on this platform, and all that you guys are, obviously I don't have all the vocabulary I want to express how much I appreciate it, love y'all, and look forward to 7 days from today when we can do this all again. And for those of you on Facebook, Mom can't see you, but love you, Mom. And for those of you watching the recording, wow, thanks for sticking around. Please do all the awesome Facebook stuff and leave comments. I know we gotta have a comment on this one tonight, so please leave those in there. And until next week, take care, go out, make the world a better place, be kind to each other. Thanks again, Lenora. And I'm gonna sign off.
Bye, guys. Have an amazing week.
Be safe,
Hugs to
TJ.
everyone.
Right? Be safe first and foremost. If you need to stop and rest, please stop and rest. Okay.
I love that. You guys stay well. Have an amazing week. Thank you for
Good night,
everything.
everybody.
I will. Thank you so much.
See you next week.